Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome back to the road to FNM. Two in a blue at you here. Same deal as last week, just gonna kind of chat on my drive from work to my local FNM. Apologies, there might be a little bit of coughing. I'm still kind of getting over some allergy, hay fever type crap. Not the Rona, I promise. I've gotten both my jabs. I'm all good, but okay. So, a couple of things I wanted to talk about. The biggest one, at least right now, is Proxies. That's kind of what's been on my mind for the past several weeks. As I mentioned on the cast, I played in a local CEDH tournament, which did not allow Proxies. So that I used that criteria to kind of force myself into a restriction where I brewed without any reserved list cards. And I just played a no reserved list Urza deck, which, was fantastic because Urza is fundamentally broken. And I actually won. But ever since then, the manager who has been running the tournaments has been trying to get me to rejoin the tournament. And I've told him multiple times that I'm thinking about it, but a big sticking point for me is no Proxies. I mentioned it, there's a pre-recording that none of you ever heard, so I shouldn't say mention it, because none of you would know that, but in the original, the unaired pilot, as it were, for Strange Brews, or not for Strange Brews, Road to FNM, I talked about a person at my LGS who adamantly said that Proxies he will hate people out of a game if he sees any Proxies on their side of the table. Here's the reality of the situation. CDH is an expensive format. It's, I would argue, one of the most expensive. Urza is $15,000. $15,000. That is a car. Like, a lot of people, including myself, are not willing to spend that much money on a single deck of cards, but we still want to play CEDH. So, obviously, we turned to proxying as a method of getting in games with our friends. But when it comes to sanctioned tournaments, Proxies aren't allowed. I'm sort of brewing kind of a tournament of my own. Potentially might be a Strange Brews thing, might just be a two in a blue thing. I haven't really decided. I haven't brought it up to Sean yet. I don't know if he'd even be interested. But that will be a proxy-friendly tournament. Because whereas other formats like, say, Modern, you can actually, I would say you're able to actively compete with, an $80 burn deck versus, Jund. In CEDH, not so much. You kind of have to meet this sort of bare minimum requirement of power level in your cards, and a lot of those cards are incredibly expensive. I'm not even talking about Mana Crypt, but Mox Diamond, Lion's Eye Diamond, all of the fast mana that's on the reserve list is incredibly expensive. A lot of the cooler, again, in terms of specifically Urza, we're talking Transmute Artifact, Copy Artifact, Power Artifact, Duretti, stuff like Wheel of Fortune, and Fork, some lists run. And that's not even getting into the multiple colored decks. Even non-reserve list cards like Imperial Seal. Imperial Seal isn't on the reserve list, but it's an $800 card for a worse version of Vampiric Tutor. But if you're playing a black deck, you kind of need both. So in my so humble opinion, proxies are a necessity to keep this game alive. If nothing else, solely for the fact that the reserve list supply is finite. And, I mean, there are only so many time twisters in the world. Like, what are we gonna... I said, and I'm talking out of my ass, but I would wager that there are fewer time twisters in the world, not even talking about available to purchase, just in general, than there are excuse me. There's fewer time twisters than there are CEDH players, and if you're playing a blue deck, you need a time twister. There is nothing in the game that does anything like it, with the exception of maybe Time Spiral, and that's at like 6 mana. I guess I know it's technically, usually you cast it and it comes out mana positive or mana neutral, but the initial investment is still 6 mana, and it exiles itself on resolution. Like any other twister effect, for that amount of mana, for 3 mana, either exiles itself or ends the turn. I think there's like an Origins one that ends the turn. Echo of Eons, you can cast it as a time twister for 3, but only as a flashback cost, and then you exile it. So, time twister is an absolute necessity in I would say the majority of blue decks. And there's a finite supply. So if you're going to try and, you have to, we as a community, and I think the majority of CEDH players do, but we all have to embrace proxies. This is how we're going to be able to get in good games. I don't want to play a game against someone playing, I don't want to play against a budget CEDH list, and I have like full Urza, or even full Duretti. I don't want to play against your budget Yisan list because I don't feel like it's going to be fair. Now, that being said, there are some budget lists that can, like, spank the table. But I would say those are pretty rare or pretty niche. And even still, they're usually powered down versions of fully powered decks, and the only reason they're quote-unquote powered down is because of budget. And if budget was not an object, we would all be playing with these incredibly powerful cards. So, there's all that. In addition, and I don't like the fact that the person who organized the tournament is a very, very good friend of mine. We have absolutely no beef, and I'm not trying to start any, but they're also a person who owns multiple reserve list cards, multiple duels, all of the fast mana, like, they have a legitimate CEDH collection worth, I would say, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. So, like, for them, saying no proxies, well, it's not that big a deal, because they already own everything. Say that to me, who works full-time at a minimum wage job just to make ends meet. You know, I can't afford to go out and buy Grim Monolith, Power Artifact. Like, I can't, these things that are kind of necessary for Urza. Now, I did find with Urza specifically that because of the raw power of the commander, usually those kind of things, like, I didn't see that much. I saw maybe like a 10% loss in percentage of, like, card quality. But, other than that, the deck was still pretty powerful. That does not translate directly to every other deck. If I cut the reserve list out of Duretti, the deck is basically dead. It's like a high-powered stacks deck. But it is not CEDH. Because Duretti needs things like Mishra's Workshop to be able to keep up. Fuck, I didn't even mention Mishra's Workshop. That's like a $3,000 land, and it is kind of essential to any deck that's wanting to do, like, Trinisphere on turn 1. Reliably. So, it's kind of gatekeeping to say, well, since I own all these reserve list cards, I don't feel a problem with saying no proxies. Everyone else just fend for themselves. That's not fair. The other thing I wanted to talk about is table image. As open play, excuse me, and FNMs and things start to become a thing again, I just want to remind everybody to be conscious of how you present yourself at the table. Excuse me. I've been told that I look very angry when I'm playing. Part of that I'm going to just say is my resting bitch face. Part of it is the look I get when I'm focusing. And part of it is sometimes Magic is frustrating. It is. And sometimes if you're like me and you kind of wear your... in-game, you wear your heart on your sleeve, it's hard. It's hard to not show that emotion. And it's not wrong to show that emotion. The important thing is to never lose sight of the fact that it's just a game. It's a pretty fun game, and usually just a game between friends, or even so, like, people that you share something in common with. So you should treat it like a fun game. And also keep in mind, like 6 months ago, we didn't know when we were going to be able to play in person again. So cherish this opportunity and, like, just, I don't know, be like, I don't want to say be grateful, but, like, be happy that we as a world are starting to move back towards that point. And the other thing is, especially in 1v1, but it also applies to Commander, it's respectful to your opponents to maintain at least a professional courtesy. And what that entails is different for every person. For me, what it means is trying not to let my frustration show, announcing every action that I'm taking, so there's no confusion, waiting for priority to be passed. And I'm not talking about, like, waiting, literally saying, do you pass priority on literally everything? Obviously that's not what I mean. But I mean, like, don't go, okay, untap, upkeep, draw, and, like, maybe they had something in your draw step, or maybe they had something in your upkeep. Like, you have to take your time. I mean, in Modern, yes, but, and I speak Modern because that's what I'm playing tonight. I'm playing Jund. Cut my Dreadhorde Arcanist for Dauthi Voidwalkers. We're going to see how that goes. But especially in CEDH, there are so many little minute technical plays that you are making to eke out, like, little value, like, over time. And you got to be patient with people, because some people aren't as familiar with CEDH. Some people aren't able to play as quickly as other players, and some people will miss things unless it's either pointed out to them or they just need an extra second. I am pulling into FNM. Good chat today. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone who watched the first episode, and I appreciate it. Until next time, this has been The Road to FNM.